that. Well, it's 4 o'clock, so I'm going to go on ahead and call the meeting to order. And with that, if the clerk could call the roll, please.
Dean? Leo? I saw her.
There's Scott. Yeah, there's Scott right there.
Leo?
Here.
Lewis, obviously here. Peterson?
Yes.
I have not seen her.
Mm-mm.
Stanton?
Here.
Trester?
Here.
And Becken is not here.
All right, and I saw Scott pop in.
Dean is here.
I did see him, thank you.
Yeah, Becken is excused with prior notice. He's taking a much deserved vacation. And I think he's either fishing or golfing at this moment, so good for him. All right, with that, any agenda changes, additions, or deletions? Anybody? All right, with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for a public comment. This is the opportunity for folks who've joined in with us today to comment on any agenda item, please. If you'd identify yourself and limit your comments to 3 minutes, that would be greatly appreciated. Please either use the raise your hand signal through the Zoom link or *6 if you're calling in on a landline. And if the clerk could help me identify anybody who wishes to speak at this time.
I do not see anybody, but I am wondering if one of those dial-ins might be Chris Peterson. She said she was going to try and dial in. It's
I
possible.
don't know. Anybody recognize a phone number for Chris? Okay, last call for public comments on any agenda item. All right, with that, we're going to move on to discussion items. The first thing up is pop-up patios, and I understand, Mr. Manager, that this is Cindy Osman. Is that correct? You're muted, bud. You're muted, Ryan. There you go.
That is the quote of the year. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is a direct handoff to Cindy.
Okay.
Go for it, Cindy.
Uh-oh.
You know, Cindy took a very, very, very long time to connect, and I suspect they may be having internet issues at City Hall. I think she may have dropped off.
Okay. If that's the case, I can work through this.
Okay, I've finally unmuted.
Oh, there she is. Good job. Hi, Cindy.
I'll do my best to do pop-up patios. This is almost identical to what we did last year. Jeff Sluggett made some suggestions on some changes to the rules. So it's a 3-page document instead of a 2-page document. But otherwise, it's the same rules as last year. We talked about parking extensively. I know that was an issue, but that kind of is what it is. If anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Any questions from the crew? I know, Lauren, you were a part of this, and I still don't see Chris on the call, Chris Peterson. So, Lauren, anything to add?
No, the only major complaint that we had about pop-up patios was that it took away some parking downtown. And of course, we all know that parking is at a premium. Cindy did reach out to our engineer to see what options we had, whether that was making Butler Street one way and putting diagonal parking in, but it sounds like we wouldn't net that many more parking spaces for us to do it. According to the engineer, we would only be able to do the diagonal parking on one side because Butler Street's not wide enough to do diagonal parking on both sides. So Cindy thought it seemed like it was better that we left it as is because we weren't going to net that many parking spots if we did that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Hey, Cindy, remind us how many parking spaces were actually taken out. Did we do a count? You're muted.
There were 40 spaces that were taken up by the pop-up pad. Out of how many spaces?
Out of how many? I do not know the answer to that question. Although I can tell you the parking issues have been studied to death over the last 40 years. And I think we've squeaked out just about all that we can, with the exception of perhaps where the duck spaces are marked off. I think we could reclaim those. The duck's license expired, and I understand he does not have intentions to renew it.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council on this?
Mayor Pro Tem Garnet.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Scott.
Just an observation. I mean, we have sort of three related items on the agenda. You know, we have the pop-ups, we have the social district, and the Wix tent request. Maybe this isn't the time for it, but I'm just wondering if it does make sense for us to try to look at this in a holistic manner and come up with a plan that helps the businesses during the pandemic, but also sort of captures all of these various missions, you know, social district, pop-up patios, the need for a tent if the weather is acclimate. Feels like we're sort of, and that maybe this is okay, that we're sort of doing this like in pieces. Just an observation. I'm totally in support of whatever helps the businesses manage through the pandemic. It just feels like we're sort of doing small chunks and not doing it in kind of a holistic manner.
Okay. So another.
Garnet,
Anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
I could address that a little bit. I think the idea of pop-up patios is for our main summer season, or at least warm weather, good weather season. The idea of a social district is for those shoulder seasons to create some help during the shoulder seasons. And then the tents are more based on, per event or per request. And the social district enables that to happen in all the various areas in case somebody wants to do something that's a larger pop-up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that helps a lot, Lauren. Thanks. Now that I consider it as something that's each one has sort of a season or a time of year with it, it makes more sense to me being separated. Thanks.
Other comments or questions from council?
Karen, I had some questions.
Okay.
I noticed reading through that it says, I wondered, are pop-ups lit or some pop-ups lit 24 hours a day?
The new application for 2021 does require them to be lit for 24 hours a day. It's especially necessary when it's dark outside and traffic is still in the street, and they have to be able to see that that pop-up is there, and it's not a parking space. It's a designated space for eating and drinking.
Okay, so that's really a safety. That's a rule for safety.
Yep.
And then I assume that Scott at DPW is completely in the loop. It's probably a silly question, but I know that I just wanted to double check.
Yes, that's one of the changes to the rules, is that Scott has to have access to those streets when he's doing routine maintenance. When there's manhole cleaning, that he has to be able to get to the manholes. And when there's street striping, he has to be able to do that. And when there's, the most important one though probably is misdig tickets, because misdig tickets come in sporadically, and it's required for the utility companies to mark their utilities on the ground. And he had one time when he was under somebody's table spray painting a marking on the pavement, and it's going to happen. So
Gar?
Yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Cindy, I don't know if you kept close track of this, but last year there were some folks who marked off their pop-up space and then didn't use it for a considerable amount of time, like a week. Do we do any enforcement on that?
I'm not I'm not aware of any that were closed for like a week. I know that they have different hours. For example, Grow usually closes at 4 o'clock. And so then in the evening, it's not used. And Bodie's doesn't open until 5. So in the morning and the afternoon, they're not open. So it really gives the appearance of not being used. But I did have some phone calls from pop-up patio owners that said they were used heavily after 5. So
Oh, yeah, you know, I know that most of them were used very heavily, but I think particularly the ones in front of the Mermaid stood empty for what I thought were a considerable period of time.
the
Yeah,
mer-
I can talk about that. Well, Cindy, you may know. Go ahead. You go
No, you
first.
go ahead, Garn.
Well, I just actually had this conversation with Sue and Eric. They don't plan on having that set up out there on the Water Street side this time. I think their plan is to move around and have the picnic tables. You probably already noticed around by the Baldy Meats side. So
Okay.
they don't tend to set up. So, was that what you were going to say, Cindy?
No, I was going to say that Coppercraft by the Mermaid called and asked me about it, and they said that they did a lot of business out of their pop-up patio.
Okay. Yeah, they certainly did, but further down the building, yeah. So Cindy and Lauren, for those of you who were on this committee, you know, based on last year's comments and feedback, I imagine there were certain things that you addressed that kind of popped up last year, no pun intended, as far as whether it was safety or lighting. I saw that smile, Ryan. So, were there any things that arose last year that have now been addressed in this one so that you're kind of alleviating issues?
The big one was
Mayor Pro Tem.
DPW access to the streets for maintenance that was
Okay.
added. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of comments that I heard, and I included with our brief meeting with Lauren and Chris. But
Mhm.
those really were either individual comments or comments that you couldn't really address.
Yeah.
Somebody said, for one thing, they weren't classy. And that's something that you can't regulate beauty.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
Gar,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Chris. You made it. Hi.
I've been on. I just couldn't figure out how to unmute
Oh.
myself.
Oh, there you
We walked. I know, so stupid. We walked through a lot of the issues that you've already talked about. The one that was kind of a issue was about keeping them clean. Scott doing the manholes. I think that was just one day a year, and that hopefully could be done before everybody gets going. But there were several complaints about people not keeping things swept up, garbage picked up, and we didn't really have an outcome or an answer for that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All
I
right.
think the idea was that the street sweeper, the street sweeper had to go around the pop-ups. And so a lot of garbage might collect in some of the corners. And we were just asking that the restaurant owners, take care of that. So.
Okay. All right. And Cindy, I imagine you'll have some kind of a communication regardless of the application where you can kind of stress that point as far as keeping things tidy.
yes, last year I required every owner or operator to come in and meet with me individually and review all the rules and what the expectations were. And I was surprised that there were such accumulations in the corners because it was one of the things we discussed. I can stress that a lot more heavily this time during our meeting. We also talked about enforcement. Do we want to give them a ticket if they don't keep it clean, or do we want to pull their license? I mean, there's a lot of different things we can do, but those are just some ideas.
Okay. And as a group, did you have recommendations along those lines, or is that something yet that you want to review or decide upon?
I think it needs to be a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
And there's some of them are going to have a lot of dirt, and some of them are going to have a few leaves or twigs. And if it's bad, we should probably give them a ticket. If it's really, really bad and continues to be bad, we could consider pulling their license, but that's something that I wouldn't do without consulting with all of you.
Great. Great. All right. Very good.
Madam.
Any other, go on ahead,
Madam-
Ryan.
Oh, thank
Go
you. One thing that Cindy and I talked about as far as regulating these pop-ups is providing Scott Herbert, DPW, with some type of violation notice, just kind of a warning. And he could write on there what the warning is about. But he's kind of the eyes and ears, and he deals with the brunt of the street work. So that is also an option to consider.
Okay.
That's
All right. All right. Anything else from council? So this will be on the agenda Monday then for approval, correct?
I just want to thank the folks that met on it, and I think it's a great thing for the town, and I'm just really excited to see it on the workshop today and to know that it's coming back. So
Yeah, ditto that. Talking to a number of business owners, they're very pleased that this is back up again. Really, really thankful, actually. So, all right, we'll look for it Monday then. Okay, next up, park use policy. This will be Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. Just
That's a lot
that's
of
a
words.
mouthful. Yeah, I'll just go with Mayor Pro Tem then. I'll drop the madam if you don't mind. So just for a brief description for the benefit of your audience, if you don't mind, the reason this is on here is because the council is looking at amending a policy to allow the use of the Coughlin Park space, expanding beyond the gazebo. So council directed staff to develop an amended policy which would allow for the administrative approval for private events in the park space. Again, expanding beyond the limits of the gazebo. Considering that many of the rules and regulations related to park rental are already covered in the policy for the gazebo rental, which allows for administrative approval. The approach that I took was just to amend that existing policy. So included in the packet is a redlined version of the existing policy. And then I also included a document that highlights the concerns and considerations for council. And then also included is a list of events that have either historically have taken place in Saugatuck or are on the books for this year. And this is the council's first review of this policy or the amended policy. It may take you a few meetings to get through. I would encourage you to take your time. That's something that local government's good at quite often, but for good reason. So, but hey, you may be very well organized and have your thoughts collected on this and be ready for action on Monday. Who knows? So, Mayor Pro Tem, would you like me to just touch on the red line version quick? And then
go for it.
Okay. So the first amendment you see is the expansion of the policy procedure at the top here, where I've just added in and park space. And then I touch on the fact that it's going to be amended possibly on the 22nd of this month. Next red line is under the reservations category. And I just list there that the dates listed on Exhibit A are not available for rental. There is no Exhibit A, to be clear, but I predict there will be Exhibit A or Exhibit B for the rental agreement. Next red line is under seating. And when the council talked about this at their last meeting, they talked about vendors and not having one specific vendor opening it up to other vendors. So I just removed the singular and added a vendor.
Okay.
Decorations. So if they expand into the park space, they're going to want, if it's for a wedding, they're going to want an arch, most likely permitted, but not to be staked. And then under restrictions, again, related to staking, just remove the word tent. Just don't put anything in the ground. that you're going to electrocute yourself or break our sprinkling system. And so that's the red line on the existing policy. Any questions on that?
Questions for Ryan?
Yeah.
Go.
Ryan, is
Go
there,
ahead.
yeah, thanks, Mayor. Is there any conflict on the alcohol restrictions if we move ahead with the social district?
It's a good question. I think the social district will be limited to your shoulder seasons. So I believe there would be a potential conflict with consuming alcohol in the park during the summer. And I'll turn to Cindy to help me out with that one.
Right. I did put in some proposed dates for the social season, and those are just placeholders until you decide when you want the social districts to be available. But for the most part, it would be not in the summertime. There would be no social districts in the summertime, and that's usually when the weddings are held. And they would only be from October 15 to April 1. And those are just placeholders. You can tinker with those. But yeah, I don't think that would be a conflict with a wedding.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Go
Chris,
ahead,
I have
Holly.
a question.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I looked at the form that they have to submit, and it does say, will there be alcoholic beverages during the wedding? Do we want to leave that open or just not allow that? And then the second question I had was, we've talked a lot about the parking issues. Would we be interested in any way? Obviously, it's a very cheap venue for people that do that, reasonable price. Maybe we could have some type of requirement for a bus to take people up and back. When you have 200 people at a reception, they got to park somewhere. So maybe that could be some way we could make sure that they at least do most of their parking up at the high school. That's all I have.
That's a good question. Others? I think I heard Holly back in there.
Yeah, Ryan, I think one thing we were gonna do is see if our fees were in line with other municipalities. Do we know if we're $500 is the going rate for a charming wedding in a Rivertown resort community?
Councilwoman Leo, I have not done that, but we'll be happy to do that and should be able to get you some info for your Monday meeting.
Because to Chris's point, is $500 a good? You guys think that $500 is a good price? It is. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking, are we at least covering our costs for the time that DPW takes? I mean, it's obviously not a money maker for us, but I don't want to lose money on it. And I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference to a bride, whether it's 500 or 750, or I'm just wondering if it's in the wedding ballpark.
Okay. Something to look into.
Okay.
I would think. Other questions? Do you want to go through these considerations, Ryan, or are we just kind of touching on them?
You know, this is your workshop.
Mhm.
So I think it would be good to just go through them.
Okay.
They do address the item that was brought up by Councilwoman Peterson.
Mhm.
So this could trigger some other thoughts in advance of your Monday meeting. So I'll quickly walk through it.
Mhm.
And if there's questions, I'll address them.
Okay.
Or I'll try. So I'm looking at page 9 of 55. And so the first question is, should the city limit the area in which the private events take place in the larger park? So pros for limiting the space would be that it would allow for concurrent use of the park. And so other activities, so they're not sprawling out, taking over the whole park. You know, they're confined to an area, and that way other activities could could take place in the park. Cons would be wear and tear on the grounds if you always had the events in a single area. Does not allow flexibility for unique customer preferences. Difficult for the city to enforce, right? Because we don't allow roping. So what are we going to do? Sit there and watch them if they leave what we think are the confines and go over and start chirping. Does not allow flexibility to meet the COVID-19 restrictions, right? Which, as we know, fluctuate quite often. So that's something to consider. Do we want to, or do you want to, block out peak weekends for tourism and events that have historically occurred in the city? And so included in the packet is a list of those events. And additional consideration would be blocking out, not events that just take place in the park, Coughlin Park, but just events that take place in the city, understanding that there's already so much going on and there's already a big demand on staff. Do you want another private event on those same days? Parking. So if they're an event that's affiliated with the SCA, would you require them to park in their parking lot? And then a consideration for requiring that private events taking place in the peak season in the summer provide a shuttle service. It says faux, that should be for attendees and park remotely. Reservations. So as a practice, the city will not take reservations for the gazebo for future years, and that's something to think about. I would encourage you to kind of stay with that policy, not knowing if you test this one and it may not work out, don't book into a future year in case you have to, modify whatever policy you end up with. Should you allow more than one event in the park per day? That's something else to consider. Other restrictions, I mentioned this one, allow for arches, but no staking, stay in compliance with COVID-19 restrictions. Then also not listed here, but something to think about is possibly limiting the number of people that are allowed to use the park space, which could take care of some other issues. So those are just some things that I heard about, and just some considerations as you formulate your policy.
Okay. So this is a question for Ken, and literally for all of council, I guess. So we're in a policy like this. Number one, how would it affect something like a Venetian festival or the 4th of July activities that the Rotary Club does, or Glow in the Park? Because Venetian specifically has 2 tents, if I recall correctly, as does Glow in the Park, and I believe those are staked. So Ken, what has been the practice in the past? Are we differentiating between, is this a wedding policy only, or is this an events policy? That's where I started percolating a little bit, because it's like, are you going to differentiate between the two? So I guess my first question is for Ken, as far as tents and tent setup and the staking and such like that. Those are all staked tents, right?
Yeah, they certainly are. Although there is a trend towards non-stake tents these days, but they're pretty expensive. The Venetian Festival probably puts the most stress on the park. We have 3 or 4 tents that we put up. We've got a stage, we've got a dance floor. So we work very closely with DPW to minimize damage, and I think we've been pretty successful. I don't, I can't speak for Cow Hill officially now, but I would say that they certainly bank on the ability to have a bar, to have a band, to have all the things that are offered there, because it's a source of their charitable work. Almost 90% of their funding comes from that event. So if we set up these rules, I think we definitely have to have two sets. One would be for the so-called special events that the city endorses, like the Venetian or the Rotary and so on, and then another for these private
Got it.
events. Does
Got
that
it.
sort of go where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because it's and I won't speak for everybody, but it's like you don't want to box yourself in, so to speak. And so I think we would have to be very specific about this being a policy for private events. And then I think you could go to a lot of the questions that you're asking, Ryan, limiting size, no alcohol, number, those types of things you can do. So that's why I'm saying this, because I don't think I really see it indicated here to be for a private event. So,
Garn,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I don't have the ability to raise my hand because I'm the admin, but I just wanted to contribute the way the policy is currently being managed. The gazebo private event rental is managed administratively by staff. A special event permit is much more extensive, requires police, fire, and DPW sign off, tent inspections, all that kind of thing, and requires council approval.
Okay.
So currently there are two policies. This is to modify, as I understand it, just the gazebo park rental policy for private events. And I don't know that it would affect or conflict with your current process for managing the two things, one being sort of for the public benefit and one being for private, if that helps.
Right. Yeah, nope, and clerk, that was, I wanted to make sure that we were distinguishing between the two. So that was the point of my questions. Because I don't believe that we also charge for those city endorsed events like a Venetian, do we? Do they have to pay? Again, Ken, I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know what Rotary did, but Venetian, excuse me, Venetian paid for direct outlays for a city like police, additional police support and things like that.
Got it.
And also we pledged to provide a certain amount, I believe it was $1,000 a year to the holiday lighting fund.
Mhm. Got it. Okay.
Oh, in fact, I could correct that. It was a percentage of the take that they agreed to provide to the city.
Even better. Okay.
Actually not. Usually the $1,000 was a roundup rather than a reduction.
Okay, got it. Very good. All right, so Ryan, kind of coming back to this, then it is specific, the policy is specifically for a private event, such as a wedding, which is an administratively approved thing.
Yeah,
right?
Yes,
okay.
It is. And that was good clarification by the Madam Clerk. And so, yeah, there is a distinction there. And again, this is a modification of the existing policy, which allows for administrative approval, whereas special events come through the council and it's much more rigorous in its review.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments by council? My sense is at this time, Ryan, I think you can probably take the feedback that people have offered you and try to incorporate that in here. If you think it's timely to bring it up on Monday, we could talk with Mark. You and I can talk about that. If not, we can review it again for the next workshop. What are your druthers?
Well, I only have a few notes. I don't know that I have a lot of feedback. I would love to hear more, but at the same time, you may not be ready to pass a policy on this on Monday.
Mayor?
Go ahead, Ken.
I think, I don't know if you have thoughts, Ryan, on how to do this, but it seems to me we should have a separate set of rules for city endorsed events, whatever we're going to call those, to be explicit, because obviously they rely on alcohol use and some things that are prohibited under this policy here.
And it sounds like, according to the clerk, that we do have that. That would be that special event permit, if I understand correctly.
But I think it would be helpful to just reflect that in this policy.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Got it.
Just so people understand there's a difference between the two categories.
Got it. Understood.
So I
Go
can,
ahead, Holly.
I can just weigh in a little bit, Ryan.
Mhm.
I, like Chris, I thought the parking points, just, we need to touch on parking, as Chris said, but I like what you said, providing a shuttle arranged in advance or arranging parking with the SCA. That seems like a great policy. I would definitely limit the events to major events in the park. And it doesn't bother me where people set up. I don't know if council is interested in restricting the number of weddings that we have, but I think we're talking about kind of 5 or less generally. Is that sort of how it's been historically? We're not talking
Yeah.
about, I mean, COVID may push us up a bit this summer, but I don't know.
Looks like we have 3 so far. Go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Go for it.
We predict that if you pass a policy that allows for these events to take place, there will be a fairly large demand. How big that is, who knows? But given the cost and the kind of premier location, I think once word gets out, it's something to be concerned with, because everyone's looking for a venue that's outside, and it's something to be aware of. We just really don't know how many will take place, or will get requests for, but we predict, or at least I predict, that there will be quite a few.
Currently, I have 6.
I would
Oh,
just,
good.
we would have to go along with whatever the state order is. So if outdoor gatherings are limited to 100, that might have to limit the wedding to 100.
That's
So,
a really good point, Lauren.
consider-
Yeah.
So I would at least put in there that whatever the governor's order is, because hopefully we'll be past this at some point, but right now it would have to be limited if that were the case.
That is true.
Then we can
That's-
address it later.
Yeah. At least for now, that helps with the size limitation, and that buys staff, if you will, to be able to administratively put together a final policy and suggestion. I think it really helps to have that recommendation in place. Chris, I hear you back there. Got
I think that's an excellent point of Lauren. The only one I would be concerned about now is the first wedding has 200 people. So we'll have to keep an eye on what the governor's, isn't it in June, Aaron?
Yeah.
I believe the first one is in June and the last one is September 11th. And I believe we have 2 confirmed, and the other 4 will probably be confirmed shortly. I think they're working on getting insurance and payment.
Yeah.
We-
So
we
if I
need to
look,
let them.
yeah, sorry,
Excuse me,
Chris.
you go ahead.
Well, I'm
No,
looking
go
at the
ahead.
sheet here with the events. So on the wedding on the 19th of June, 100 guests. The wedding on the 26th of June, 40 guests. So right now they're okay. They're within that 100-person limit.
Perfect.
All right. What do you think, Ryan?
I think I have enough information to be slightly dangerous.
I think at least for, my sense is that I know we've got some decisions to make that'll come up next. But so here are my thoughts, and council can agree or disagree with me. My sense would be that staff should go back and basically edit and adjust based on the comments and such that were mentioned today to include parking. I would suggest that staff then make some recommendations in that policy about parking options. In a way, you're kind of your own little mini committee, putting together kind of a draft for folks to approve at the end. Does that make sense? Is that good with everybody?
Sure.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I sense it is an administrative thing. I mean, this is something administrative that you all would approve. I would want you all to be comfortable with it, and then come to us. I'm going to speak for Mark here, but basically come back to us and say, this is what we suggest based on what we know as far as the issues that we would face on a regular basis with weddings.
Okay, very good.
Does that sound good? Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okie dokie. I've lost my agenda. There it is. All right. Are we good? Move on to the next thing. Special event for wedding in Coughlin Park. Ryan.
Hey.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to hand this over to Aaron to address.
Okay. Okay.
Madam Clerk.
Yes, so as we've just been discussing, the current policy that I have to work with is restricting to the gazebo specifically, and there's a map that documents the footprint you're allowed to use. This bride is looking to set up at the top of the hill near the sculpture. And so since you guys are reviewing the policy, but she still needs to continue, planning and confirming things, we ran it through a special event application, which is, the form is a slight mismatch for a private event. But we did that just to kind of keep it moving and hopefully, have you guys approve it if you're okay with what she's looking to do. And then, you would have time to continue working on finalizing that policy. This would kind of just be like a one-off, so to speak.
Got it.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Questions for the clerk? Crickets. Everybody's good with it. Okay.
The only other thing I can contribute, which is just something I've learned recently, I believe when you are, and Cindy is the one who can probably correct me if I am mistaken, in regards to the price, I believe you can only charge what you would need to administratively, it's not something that you can say, we're going to have a $3,000 fee because that's in line with other wedding venues because it's public property. I believe the restrictions are that it has to be to cover just your expenses related to kind of staff time or whatever administering it. And currently the DPW really doesn't, other than, their regular lawn mowing and turning off the sprinklers and staking things, they're not responsible for cleaning up trash or any of the other things that they might kind of, they don't have to bring barricades or do any of the other things they might for a normal special event.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. Questions from council regarding this one?
Ms. Pro Tem, this is
Go on
Chris.
ahead, Chris. Yeah.
Aaron, clarify that for me again. If it's a special event, we can only charge what the cost is to our staff. And if it's a wedding, we can do a $500 fee? we can't do it
Cindy would probably have to be better equipped to answer that. She knows just so much. But as I understand it, at least when I did Glow in the Park, I don't think that there was a fee with my special event to throw Glow in the Park there. I know that we discussed that there should be some kind of a fee because when you do Glow in the Park, you're asking for barricades, you're asking for cones and all kinds of stuff the DPW has to drop off. You produce a ton of trash and it just creates a lot of extra work. So it seems reasonable that the council, if you're going to review this as two separate things, one being the gazebo policy and the other being, the special event policy, I think you would probably be justified to charge for both. But I think what I understand, the gist of it that I understand is you cannot do it as a money-making venture. You can do it to cover your expenses.
Yep.
Is that right, Cindy?
Yeah, Cindy.
Yes, there was a Supreme Court decision in Lansing about, it was a Bolt decision. And your fees they have to be reasonably related to your cost. Otherwise, it is a tax. So that's why we can compare with other municipalities, but we can't compare with private event places.
Sure. Yeah. Understood. Okay. All right. So back to our special event application. Chris, did that get you the clarification you looked for?
It did. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Other questions or concerns regarding this specific special event application for the Spolstra wedding? All right,
No.
if not, looks like, yeah, who'd I hear? Anybody? Sorry, it's hard to keep track. All right, with that, Ryan, then I think we're good to go. This can be on the agenda Monday for final vote. Sound
Thank you.
good? All right, very good. Okay, next up, special event, Wicks Park Bar and Grill tent request. I think I saw Christine Murphy was on. And so Cindy, is this for Cindy?
It is, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go for it, Cindy. Uh-oh. Is she there?
Christine of Wicks Park Bar and Grill is requesting a tent permit for a special event. And this is a special event because it involves using the streets and the parking places in front of Wicks for 2 weeks in March. It would bookend Irish Day, St. Patrick's Day, and it, depending on the weather, it could provide additional seating for people who otherwise would not be able to get indoors. So that's really what this is about. The original application was to be in Water Street, but after we talked about it, it evolved kind of into a Mary Street closure for the very end of Mary Street. It's a much less traveled street than Water Street. Water Street, I don't know, Aaron, if you can show the potential location drawing. And those are the two areas. And closing the end of Mary Street makes more sense. Traffic visibility around a large tent on Water Street would be a problem, sightline visibility. And it just is very, very tight there. So that would be the advantage of closing Mary Street would be, and it's just for 2 weeks. It's not the whole summer or anything like that. I just think the one on Water Street would cause more problems than the Mary Street one. And late this afternoon, I did get the approval of the fire department and the Department of Public Works. And earlier we did get approval from the sheriff's office. So
Approval for,
that they sign off that they're good with it.
okay, regardless of where it's at.
Yeah, well, they don't like the Water Street one very much, but the Mary Street one, they're good with that.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, that answered my question.
Oh, okay. Council, questions, comments? Go for it, Lauren.
Yeah, when we talked about this, there was concern from Cindy and from Scott at DPW that if it was on the Water Street, it's at a corner there and traffic would have to go into the other lane. And but there's this nice little Mary Street on the side there that also connects to Wicks Park. And we thought, why not just block that off and not block off any driveways or anything? And we thought that was a good alternative and might be able to be used in the future for some social district ideas as well. So just keep that in mind.
Okay. Others?
Madam
Go ahead,
Mayor,
Scott. Oh,
Yeah,
go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Okay, I had several calls from people voicing concerns having to do with fire hazards. And you said that the fire department has approved that. Will they go in, do you know, will they go in when it's set up to make sure that everything is being done as it's supposed to?
Yes, they would. Whoops, yes, they would have to go in and pre-approve the plan, and they would have to do an inspection of the tents. And they did submit a list of conditions that they would apply. But I did get it late this afternoon, so I didn't have time to share it with you, but we can put it in the packet for Monday so you can see the list.
Okay,
All right.
and then I remember we discussed a little bit about how late the music goes. if there is a band? And are we staying with the 11 o'clock, or was there a request to have it a little later?
The request that we received did not include live music. So that wouldn't.
that- Those are my only questions. Thank you.
Scott?
Thanks, Mayor Pro Tem. The Water Street tent, are they contemplating, or were they contemplating something significantly larger than the tent they had in place? I believe it was for New Year's, and they still have a bit of a outdoor area that's covered. So this would have been significantly larger. Was that the concern regarding Water Street?
I think the Water Street application had a 20-foot wide tent, where this would be a 30-foot wide tent.
Okay, thanks.
Be larger.
Okay, and I'm assuming if we do go forward with this, we're prepared then to create the precedent that if another business wants to have a street closure, we're okay with creating that precedent and in a position to approve that depending on the street that's requested.
I think that every venue is unique unto itself, and that's why it's a special event permit, so we can get input from the fire department and the sheriff and the DPW. This pop-up patio does not include a tent. It's cleared out, clearly spelled out in the application that it does not include tents. So that's why this is different. I think we'd have to look at each one individually as a unique application.
Okay, that's a good point. That's a special event permit. That's a really good point.
Okay, thanks for that.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead, Ryan.
This might be a good opportunity to bring up the mayor's concerns, because they're in line with Mr. Dean's comments or question.
You want me to read it?
I can read it. You can read it.
Go for it. You go for it.
Oh, great. Thanks. So Mayor Becken sent an email regarding this issue, and he admires, I guess I'll quote, I admire the owner's efforts to keep their business functioning throughout these challenging times. It is a business threatening situation shared by bar and restaurant operators in Saugatuck and throughout the state. However, approving the request to close Mary Street is setting a precedent for future similar requests that will be very difficult for the city to refuse. These requests could come up from food establishments currently open and those who may decide to reopen to take advantage of a street closure precedent. Based on setting such a precedent, I cannot support the request to close the west end of Mary Street. So that's from Mayor Becken.
Other comments or questions from council? I understand Christine is on, and in the past, we've given folks an opportunity to comment if they were the person who submitted it. Christine, do you have a comment you'd like to pop in?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first, when I put up a tent, that's technically indoor dining. So I have to treat that just like I would treat my building. So you can only have 25 capacity of what that tent is allowed to hold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 25%. Yeah.
So it's not like a tent where I'm going to be, putting in a whole bunch of people. It's pretty much just to probably get up to 50% of what I would have on St. Patrick's Day.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that comes the curfew at 10 o'clock. So it will be done at 10 o'clock because that is still getting enforced until March 31st.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when you have a tent, that's indoor dining. So therefore, it's the same rules that apply with inside. So regarding music, even if I had music, it would have to be done at 10 o'clock. Everyone has to be out of that tent at 10 o'clock. So I don't know if that help with some of the concerns of the tent, because we didn't have that at New Year's. We did have 50% capacity. We didn't have a curfew. So I think with everyone understanding that the tent is indoor dining, it might alleviate some, concerns that everyone has, which I have concerns. I mean, this isn't what I want to be doing either, but I just was trying to just have some extra space for people to kind of celebrate what we can.
Okay.
When it comes to the mayor's concerns, I get it. I don't know how it's going to look. I don't know if other establishments are going to request it. A tent is very expensive. I probably will break even on this day. So I don't know how many other restaurants will request tents in the future because of the expense it takes on. And I really, for the Mary Street side, like Cindy said, because of the safety issues, I didn't exactly love it out in front of Water Street. I was fine with it, and thank you for letting me do it, but it kind of scared me a little bit. I don't know if I'm even supposed to say that, but it was a little weird having a tent erected right there where there's cars going by all the time. So I definitely understand the concern. So when Cindy suggested maybe Mary Street, I was like, that's perfect.
Okay.
There's not much traffic down there. So I don't know how long I'm allowed to talk. So
That's-
that's
well,
pretty.
You're fine. You're okay.
Okay.
I appreciate it. Regardless,
If anyone has
it would be
any other
helpful.
questions, they can call me. They can come down and say hello to me, and I can show them how it's going to go. But like I said, it's basically indoor dining. It's not going to be anything crazy.
All right. Thanks,
It's
Christine.
pretty much. You're welcome.
Thank you, Christine.
You're welcome.
Other questions from council?
Just to wrap it up, Mayor.
Go ahead, Scott.
I'm very supportive of what Christine's trying to do, and I really admire the entrepreneurship and the innovation. I think it's great. I'm just wondering if we need to just go bigger and talk about something more dramatic, like creating a one-way system and pedestrianizing parts of our business district as part of the commercial district we're talking about, to create a level playing field for all the businesses that depend on entertainment revenue.
Got it.
Gar,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to piggyback onto what Scott said. I am actually fully in favor of closing off streets, especially in the shoulder season. I actually think this could be a great thing. And I think we should maybe think about making it accessible. Guy and I talked in November. We were thinking about, maybe expanding and having some Adirondack chairs and blankets. And, if you wanted to have like a little coffee festival one weekend in the fall or in the spring. I mean, we're a tourist town. This is our economy. And I applaud Christine and what she has done, and that girl is out there trying to do her thing, and I am here for it. So
Okay.
I think it's on brand, and I don't think we should be pulling away from it. I don't think we should be doing it for everybody that wants to do it all the time. I agree with Cindy, it should be on a case-by-case basis, but I actually think it opens up some very interesting possibilities.
This is Chris. I second everything she said. Christine's doing a wonderful job. And I think we have to look at it each venue by venue. And I don't see a problem if maybe it sets a precedent for side streets.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I think Cindy made the point that each of these would be evaluated from the standpoint of public safety and traffic flow and so on. It'd all be different. I mean, I'd never want to close the middle of Butler Street off, but certainly this street is one that I don't think will create a lot of inconvenience for anybody in the neighborhood to do what's being proposed here.
Right. Very good. Other council comments or questions? I will concur with the group. I am very happy that it's been signed off with the chief, with the fire chief and such. That always helps alleviate any concerns, not just of my own, but I'm sure of other folks who are concerned for safety and such. I also appreciate the fact that it's a special event request, so it's a one-off. So giving this a chance and seeing how it works and working out the bugs that might arise, I think is very good. So I'm fine with this. So I think, Ryan, I had you on my screen, but I think you're there. It looks like we can proceed to have this on the agenda for Monday.
Very good.
Okay, everybody good with that?
Yep.
Thanks, Christine. All right, moving on to social district. We're just into big time socializing right now. So go for it. Cindy?
Mayor Pro Tem, I have to apologize. I'm cutting off.
All right, Cindy, or Chris, see you later. Be careful.
Bye.
All right, Cindy.
Social districts. I think we've all kind of heard about social districts. There was a news article on Channel 8 last night about how smaller cities are getting involved in social districts. And what it really allows you to do is the city will create a district, and venues within that district that sell alcohol can apply to the state for a social district license. And when they're approved by the city, they can sell alcohol in a up to 16-ounce container with their logo and our logo on it. And people can leave the premises and walk around in the social district and with their open container, which currently is not allowed, but you can do it. And I did put together a district map that shows what the area is. It is basically, it's all the commercial zone districts in the downtown. So if you look, Aaron, if you want to go to the map, please. It creates two different things, or actually three different things. The green area, that's mostly light green, that would be the social district area. The darker green lines are the streets and sidewalks that you could walk with your open container. And the pink areas are the parks that would be included in the commons area. So that's kind of the district that we laid out. And I proposed, and that was just a proposal, not something carved in stone, but that the season would be, that the district would be open, would be from October 15th to April 1. April 1 is when the pop-up patios would start, so there wouldn't be as much of a need. And the sheriff's department has discouraged us from allowing it in the peak season in the summertime. So that's why I picked those dates. But that's what it's all about. I did contact our insurance company to see if we had any additional liability expenses with it, and we do not. This proposal does not suggest any closing of streets. It's just you can walk on the streets and sidewalks, and you can drive on the streets and sidewalks. So I'm happy to hear any comments and make any changes, like August,
Okay.
October 15.
All right, council question, comments.
Sorry, Garn. Cindy,
Go
what
ahead, Holly.
were the dates that you mentioned?
It says here, yeah.
The dates would be October 15th to April 1.
Other questions? Go ahead, Ken. I see you thinking.
Well, I was just noodling around with the date. The April 1 sounds fine to me, but this could be moved up to at least October 1st or even the middle of September. Weather's a little better, but still it's in the shoulder season, not in the, in the height of our tourist season. So I like this concept. But obviously, we're not going to be walking around carrying our beer in January. So if we could expand the period a bit to, to include a little better weather, that might be nice.
Well,
Go ahead.
Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem. if you would.
Lauren, go. There's so many words. Just go.
The only thing I would say is allowing this whole social district to, be the whole downtown district. It does create elements. So when we might have areas like, say we want to do a winter festival or something like that, and there's areas where we might want to close off a street or a side street. We could do that, and we could do it with the fire pits and the picnic tables the way downtown Rockford and a lot of the other communities are doing. And that really does help in the middle of winter when it's pretty desolate in Saugatuck for some of those businesses. So you would be able to say, get a mixed drink from Pumpernickel's and walk into a commons area and enjoy that next to a fire pit that, we raise money for. We might get some donations for, or the city provides, or whatever the case may be. So I'm just saying, I love the idea of this including so much of the business district, but then think further ahead of where we might be able to have streets that are closed off for special events and different things throughout, the off seasons.
Okay. Other comments or Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Gar.
Mhm.
I echo what Lauren said. I mean, giving people a place kind of to go and be socially distant and be safe with their drink, I think is sort of an important part of this. I just don't know that people just want to walk up and down the street with a drink. Maybe they do. Well, we'll find out. But to have it, have some ambiance, as Lauren described, with the fire pits or the chairs or places to sit in the park and enjoy a drink in a safe way. I think that's kind of what we need to be including in this, in our thinking. And is there a contemplated hours of operation for when businesses can sell these drinks to go?
I said 11 to 11
Is
on
it 11
page
to
40.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what the proposal says, 11 to 11.
Okay. Are we comfortable with that, those times?
I like those times.
Okay.
So other questions? I have a couple. Cindy, so a couple things. I noticed that this was modeled pretty close to the Allegan City of Allegan Social District, correct?
That's correct. And late this afternoon, I did get the review back from Jeff Sluggett. And he had some very non-substantive changes that, didn't change very much, just some wordsmithing. So that's what you would be getting on Monday.
Okay.
Or in your packet.
Okay.
There is a concern about inappropriate behavior, such as peeing in somebody's front yard, and I suppose that could happen, but you always have the right to remove the social district if there are problems that we can't overcome. It purposefully, though, included the bathrooms by the park.
Got it.
That should help, but I know when people get drinking that they sometimes act inappropriately, but that's what we have our sheriffs for.
Yeah, the other question I had was, so looking at following kind of Allegan City's the closest, I think. The October 15th to April 1, was that a similar time frame that they were following?
No, they were
Okay.
doing all year round.
So that was my second question. I mean, I recognize, for us, is April 1st, is that too soon? I think a lot of our businesses really get up and running, if you will, May the 1st. And that's a question for everybody. And along with Ken's, moving it back a little bit into the beginning of October or even mid-September, I kind of see it on the spring end of things.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, if we're talking truly not summer touristy season, that would really basically be Labor Day to Memorial Day, right? Pretty much.
Yep.
I think our businesses, again, I know our businesses certainly appreciate anything and everything that we're doing for them. And I could see this being something that would be greatly appreciated from them, and also our business organizations in town, to be able to do some special winter events as Lauren was mentioning, that would bring folks to town in the off season. So my sense would be, you know, Labor Day to Memorial Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
And I think like we need to remember what we're talking about here is carry out cocktails. It's to go cocktails within a social district. So you can't just walk around, like bring a case of beer or, you know, walk around with a drink. You have to have a cup with the logo, and you can't walk into another bar with that drink. You can't necessarily walk into a business with that drink. You just had a drink at a restaurant and you're walking around. This is not like a big open party. So I just want to make that point.
Yeah.
I agree with you, Garn. I would love to see this opened up wider, especially April 1 seems like, I don't know, seems too early. So, and it's pretty dead here for a while in the spring. So I think that would be great. I talked to Northville's DDA back in November, and they just raved about it. They said it was a huge success. It saved their business. It brought a great energy. And just like Lauren said, it created this great synergy when you coupled events with it. And then the only other thing I would say is that I noticed in Kalamazoo, some stores allow you to bring drinks in, and in Rockford, you cannot. So I don't know if that's something that we have to decide or if stores decide. I don't know, but I just wanted to make a note of that.
In paragraph 3, underneath the list of addresses that, or list of potentially participating people, it would allow stores to allow you to bring in a drink, and they would get a window cling saying that, yes, we welcome you to come in with your drink.
Nice. Scott, I saw your hand up. Go for it.
Thank you, Garn. How soon are we contemplating trying this or launching this? Do we have a date in mind?
You could act on this as early as next Monday.
The reason I ask is I think it would be really beneficial to this year in the height of the pandemic pilot this. I mean, try it, really stress test it. I mean, what if we do it before St. Patrick's Day, have it in place, and just to see how this stresses the system. Maybe it's going to be a huge success, everyone's going to behave, or maybe there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences that we hadn't contemplated. So I'm wondering if we do really, I'm really in support of doing it and the businesses as best we can during this pandemic. But I'd like to get some learnings in place before we're ready to launch it again in October. So we're going to be all in and try it. Let's try it as soon as possible.
You could enact.
Stress test it with a big weekend, like
Yeah.
see what happens.
What's that, Cindy?
You could
Go ahead,
enact it as soon as Monday and put it, once it's published, then I think it's effective 10 days after that.
Okay.
And it's up to the licensees if they want to apply or not.
That's
Yeah.
right, because they have to apply. So the communication, and I apologize, this might be in here. How would the word get out to businesses then that this was in place?
Maybe Sadaba could help with that, or
Mhm.
there's only
And
21. There's 21
right.
facilities that could potentially apply.
Mhm.
Then they each have to get a resolution by council approving them to submit to the state. So if you really want to do it and you really want to do it quickly, I could have those resolutions for all of these 21 potential participants ready by Monday, and you could approve those resolutions unless you see somebody that you don't think is worthy, which I don't know if you have any standards to think that, but I could have those by Monday, and then you could approve them all. And when they walk in with their application, I could give them the documents to submit to the state.
They have to have that for the state.
Yep.
Okay, very good. So yeah, it'd be a matter of contacting these 21 businesses and letting them know. And that wouldn't be too difficult. Ken, any thoughts? I see you moving around, percolating.
Well, I think that that's a good route to go. Being proactive on this and try to get it in place as soon as we can. And I like Scott's comment that maybe we shouldn't write this as being a permanent program. You know, have a start date and end date for this spring, and then see how that goes, and then consider how we want to maybe start it up again next fall.
And we could actually call it a pilot project.
I think, yeah, Garnet, I think we should message it as a pilot program. I mean, several months ago, I spoke to Lieutenant Ensfield about this and asked him to talk to his counterparts in the Allegan Police Department. And they really couldn't give me a good sense of what Saugatuck's experience would be, because we're such a different community than the city of Allegan. So you think the only way for us to know is to pilot it, have very pilot, and we see what happens, and then we see if the businesses liked it, if it helped them with their revenues, if it did create an unintended consequence in terms of antisocial behavior or nuisances, and then we can see where we are, you know, during the summer after we've run the pilot, and see if we want to do it in the fall.
Cindy, a couple just clarifying things. Does the city of Saugatuck need to apply to the state for a social district permit for the entire city of Saugatuck? I know we have to check that off. If we approve it, that allows you to apply for it, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, and then you are going to help businesses with an application that they need to submit to the state, or do they need to do that individually?
They need to do that individually, but they need that piece of paper from the city that says they are authorized to make that application.
Awesome. And then I would
Awesome.
add, I think you're missing Cranes on your list. Cranes next to Wick Park, they do have hard cider.
They were not on the list that I got from the state, so perhaps they're not going to be using it this year.
Oh, okay.
Can I just ask a question as an aside, Cindy?
Sure.
I think a while back you mentioned to me, or maybe it was Monica, but we don't have business licenses anymore, and we used to. Was that you, Cindy? Okay, this kind of seems like a no-brainer, because getting information out even over when COVID hit was difficult. We used to have a business license program, and now we don't. So now if we need to get in touch with businesses in downtown, we don't have a master list. We don't know names, numbers, emails. That just seems like something that Cindy mentioned that might be a good thing to do. And I think we should think about doing that.
Time to investigate, bring it back.
Yeah, I mean, $25, whatever. But I mean, this is a perfect example. Here we need a comprehensive list. And, you know, I was like, well, call Joe, call this one, you know, I mean.
Okay. All right. So it helped move us along, because we've got one more important item on our, my understanding is that we'll move ahead with this, Cindy, as a pilot. We'll move ahead to put it on the agenda for Monday, with the season this season to be extended to the Memorial Day, right? That's the way I read it. Anybody else got anything to add along those lines? And then we'll be able to move ahead. This is so awesome.
Very awesome.
Cool. All right. Anything else on that one? All right. Very good. Lastly, Ryan, moratorium on floating homes.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And also just quickly, thanks to Cindy for her quick footwork on putting all that information together. That was an amazing job.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.
So the floating home moratorium, this is a second version. I understand that we have Attorney Cliff Bloom on the call, but according to legal counsel, this version is a more targeted version of the floating home moratorium. And there's two items included in the packet, one of which is the public notification for the adoption of the moratorium. And then you have the moratorium ordinance itself. There was a couple blanks left in the moratorium ordinance, which was related to specifying the length and height restrictions of the floating home. And so you know, the permanent ordinance, which is different than the moratorium, will likely be presented at your March meeting. We have staff has received a draft copy. We're going to be reviewing that with legal and bringing that to you in March. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Attorney Cliff Bloom if he's on the call.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, this is Cliff Bloom. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah. Hi, Cliff. Thank you.
Hi. Good evening, council members. Yeah, Ryan did a very good job of summarizing. You know, the first moratorium ordinance that was passed on January 19th was the first crack at the issue, and council had some very good suggestions and questions. And the more Jeff Sluggett and I and staff talked about it, the more we thought labeling these as boathouses is probably confusing and not as precise. So we looked at many ordinances throughout the country, which we had also done prior to the last one, and we thought it's better to call them floating homes and then define it on that basis. So the terminology has been changed. I think we've tightened up the definition a bit more so it doesn't cast too wide of a net, pardon the pun. And then we also put an exemption or grandparent clause in Section 5 that basically says any floating home that lawfully existed and was located on or in the Kalamazoo River as of July 1, 2020 is exempt from this ordinance. You might say, why that date? Well, you have to put a date as to when something is in effect and grandparented, and that's probably when the most boats, I assume, were in the river during 2020. So, Mayor Pro Tem, that's kind of a summary. This would replace in its entirety the moratorium ordinance from January 19th, and if the council adopts it, the new notice of adoption would go in the newspaper and would be effective the next day.
All right. Okay. Council questions? Go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
I'll leave it to the lawyer's discretion, but are you comfortable that home, the word floating home is the appropriate word? Is that a better word than, say, dwelling or residence or accommodation? Is home broad enough for the various, types of floating structures we might encounter?
Council member, we think it is. There's no legal overall answer to that. The answer is really in how we define it. And if you look on page 3, section 2, there's a pretty detailed definition of a floating home. And then there will also be a similar detailed definition in the final ordinance. So we think, again, there's no perfect answer to that. And I think part of the problem earlier in using houseboat is it casts too wide of a net. So we're comfortable with this definition.
So this would cover things that are rentals, leased accommodation, things of that nature?
Yes, it would be a floating home for any purpose. Now, in the draft permanent ordinance, if the council adopts that eventually, it will have to deal not only with owners occupying, but also short-term rentals and so on. So that is expressly dealt with in the longer substantive permanent ordinance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Others? Go ahead. Go ahead, Ryan.
As mentioned earlier, there's a couple blanks regarding the length and height restrictions. Cindy and I talked about this earlier today, and just as a starting place, she's going to be recommending 30 feet long and 15 feet in height, and she had some rationale behind that, so I'll pass that off to Cindy real quick to explain the rationale.
Okay.
Sure. The height came from the building code where a single-story house has usually a exterior wall height of 12 feet. Now we're gonna be mounted on a barge, so we don't know exactly how much that's going to add. That's where I came up with the 15 feet. And 30 feet I took from the length of the docks, because you can see the docks at Dune Grass are 35 feet long. And they probably should not be, they should be a houseboat if they're over 30 feet. That's where they came from, and they're just starting places. If you have other ideas, I'm open to that.
Okay. Other questions from council? So go ahead, Scott.
Just, it sounds like, the ordinance would allow enforcement if any of these 4 criteria are, are violated, if you will, that would then classify it as a houseboat. But I just wonder if we're creating a loophole for, for a vessel to sort of squeak in under these numbers if we go too big. I'm not sure. I guess I'm trying to wonder what the downside is for going smaller.
So let me weigh in here for a second. So for Monday, what we're basically looking to do is to approve the moratorium ordinance based on Cliff's revisions. So that's page 46 and 47. Then the following pages, the permanent ordinance, which starts on page 49, where we get into height and length and stuff, is what we will then decide on in March, correct?
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Cliff.
Yeah.
I don't have your numbering, so no, actually, those blanks should be filled in by Monday or whenever you adopt this ordinance. But it should always be kept in mind, of course, this is just an interim moratorium ordinance.
Got it.
So for the final ordinance, many things can change, but it looks like every community that's adopted one of these ordinances, or actually the long-term ordinance, has really struggled with the definition.
Okay.
And what we did here is, it's not, we have some general definitions, but some other factors to be considered, and it's really the building official that makes the call.
Okay.
And in the permanent ordinance, if a vessel owner disagrees and believes that their vessel is not a floating house or home, then that can be appealed to whichever body you decide to allow an appeal.
Okay, understood.
So what we're trying to do is come up with a definition right now that'll work just for an interim period of time while the moratorium's in effect.
Understood. Okay, very good. And our building official is Cindy, correct? Yes, she's smiling. Okay, very good. And our building official is recommending how many feet long and how many feet high?
Well, I am a building official, but I'm not the official building official for the city. But I'm recommending 15 feet high and 30 feet long. If anybody has other ideas, I'm good with it.
Okay. Others, council, anybody? Ken, looks like you're percolating.
30 feet is, could be a good sized, I'd go smaller. I'd go like 25.
Okay.
I mean,
I could, permanent. Go ahead.
I mean, Garn, I could go buy a 18-foot pontoon boat and stick a camper on it, and I'd be legal.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good analogy. Okay, there you go.
I have a question about that. So is there any body that inspects this? Like if somebody does just like decide to weld their camper to a barge that they bought on Craigslist, like we don't know if that's seaworthy or safe. So what's the regulatory world of that?
Mayor Pro Tem, this is Cliff. Can I respond?
Go for it, please, sir.
Thank you. You're not going to like the answer, but the answer is if ultimately your ordinance allows floating homes, there will be a regulatory scheme for inspection, licensing, where they can go, all that kind of good stuff. If it's not a floating home, then the city really doesn't have jurisdiction. it falls to the Coast Guard or no, you know, for smaller, you know, the small pontoon and so on, the city probably has no authority or jurisdiction over conventional boats.
Got it. Got it.
You have extensive regulatory power over boat slips, docks, mooring areas, but conventional boats, vessels that are not floating homes and are not used for a commercial use under the zoning, the city probably has no jurisdiction.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
Does a floating home require state registration, boating registration?
I don't believe it does.
Could you?
And that's one of the things I think we're going to have to investigate as we flesh out the longer ordinance or more permanent ordinance.
Could you even register one? It doesn't have a motor, you know. I don't know the rules on that, but that would be another consideration.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Okay. All right. Other questions or comments from council? Go ahead, Holly.
So just piggybacking on what Ken just said, so should we think about, somebody that has a houseboat mentioned this to me, about having the vessel mandated to have a factory installed propulsion system, and that way it kind of would carve out a retrofit, somebody slapping their old lawnmower on there, or?
Is that a question for the attorney?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a way to, you know, maybe, I don't know if that's something we should think about. I know that some people have houseboats and they purposely take the engines out. I mean, that's living space. But I don't know if this is something we should think about. Actually, did we ask for a factory installed motor? Is that, I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud.
I think that's a good concept, and I think it should be added potentially to the factors to consider. And again, this is the permanent ordinance is going to call on the building official or whoever the city council appoints to make some judgment calls, because there is no perfect definition. And then we'll build in an appeal process, whether it's to council or the building code board of appeals or wherever, if someone feels they disagree or aggrieved. But that's a good point. I think that's a factor we can add, factory installed.
Okay. So for our purposes for today, it's just to review the amended moratorium that basically is our placeholder for the 5-month period, correct? Until we have a permanent, right?
Correct. And this would, if council adopts this, this would replace the one that council adopted on January 19th.
All right, very good. Okay. Other questions or comments? Everybody good? Cindy, you good?
I have a question, Cliff. Do we have to repeal the one from January 15?
Yeah, we have a repealer clause in section 6 on page 6, but I'll get with you to see if we need a separate repealer. I don't think we do.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, very good. Everybody good? Everybody good with that? All right, thank you so much, Cliff. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Thanks for sticking with us. All right, with that, we'll move on to public comments. Again, this is the opportunity for folks who are on the line to comment at this time on anything. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Introduce yourself. If you can either raise your hand through the Zoom link or press *6, the clerk will help me identify you. You see anything, Aaron?
No, ma'am.
Wow. All right. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, there we go. Stephen Phelps. I
Phelps
see a raised hand. All right, go for it, Stephen. Uh-oh. Stephen Phelps. Is he muted? I don't hear him.
Stephen, you should be unmuted now. Maybe.
Press *6 on his end. I wonder if he can hear me. No. Any luck, Aaron?
Hello?
Oh, hello.
Hello, this is Julie Russell. Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Julie. Go on ahead.
Is it my turn? I was pushing #6. That's all.
You're good while we're waiting for Stephen to figure out his issue. Go on ahead.
Okay. I have 3 comments.
Will you introduce
One-
yourself, please? Please introduce yourself and your place of residence.
Oh, I'm Julie Russell. I've owned Wickwood Inn at the corner of Butler Street and Mary Street for 30 years.
Very good. Thank you.
I am not a resident of Saugatuck, so I don't get to vote in the city of Saugatuck. I want to make that clear. But I've been very, very involved in the city and its evolution. I am not in favor at all of a tent and closing Mary Street. I'm afraid of the noise. The noise happens every weekend as it is, emanating from Wicks Park. I just think it's setting quite a precedence. My parking lot has entrance on Mary Street, right next to Mark Beckon's family home. I think it's starting. I think it's starting a deep hole that we're digging ourselves in, and we all know there's no policemen that you can call or that are patrolling the streets that are going to help. If my inn catches on fire, I would really like to have them have access from Water Street and Butler Street. So I just don't think it's a good idea. And believe me, I'm very, very sympathetic with businesses and COVID. I have not been open for the most part of the last year because of staffing issues. But when we were able to be open, we were immediately full. I have always run the inn as a year-round business, and our busiest season has always started early April. We've been full every day until the end of October. I've been a long advocate of the shoulder season and promoting the shoulder season in this town. I get my skin crawls every time somebody says 100 days. We only have 100 days to earn our money. No, that is just not true. We have given up on events. We have given up a lot, and we've had a lot of people who are out promoting, Saugatuck's a 100-day town. That does us no good. We used to have someone who would talk to the Grand Rapids Press regularly and say, oh, everybody in Saugatuck makes so much money they leave town for the winter. You know, we just aren't doing ourselves any favors any which way from Sunday. So I would really advocate that on these social areas and letting people have drinks walking around town from 11 o'clock in the morning until 11 o'clock at night, that you canvass the businesses and think what the businesses want for our town. I think it changes the demeanor. We know there's no one policing the streets. I mean, what do you do if somebody's rolling around on your lawn at 10 o'clock at night? What do you do if people are peeing in your backyard? There's nobody to call. Believe me, I've been in that situation. There's no one to call. And I don't think many of the people on the council own businesses in downtown Saugatuck. I can't believe that you would change the demeanor of our town and not ask the businesses their opinions of this. I mean, that just seems to be common courtesy. We're really making a radical change in our downtown. So,
all right, I'm trying to be respectful of everybody else that wants to talk. So,
hey, well, then I'll be quiet. Pretty much said what I had to say. But I really think that you're going too fast and not asking opinions of the people who have their livelihood is in this town, and you're changing the whole dynamics and the demeanor of our town. I mean, yes, a lot of people like to party. Yes, Saugatuck's been known as a party town, but throwing the streets wide open for the benefit of
Julie.
Not good. Bye.
All right, Julie. Thank you. All right. I see. I think Stephen has his hands up. And again, Aaron, you had a timer and I ended up pulling up mine, but I hate to be rude. I would rather they see the timer on the screen.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I forgot to start it.
It's all
I'm-
good.
The telephone.
You're
I'm
fine,
not on the-
Julie. You're fine, Julie. It's all good. All right, Stephen, do we have you unmuted?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Aaron.
Stephen Phelps from the Butler,
Hi,
downtown
Stephen.
Saugatuck. I am all in favor of the downtown social district. Thank you for starting the conversation about this. I do feel that maybe it should not only be limited to the shoulder season or the off season, and also throughout the summer. Operating the Butler for the last 18 years, myself, my family since 1961. People walk around town with drinks all summer long. They mix them on their boats. They mix them at their rental homes. They mix them in their cars. And they walk around and they come to our front door and want to come in with them. I think limiting that to just a short time when the potential for the businesses in town to make a cocktail to go and for everyone to walk around is kind of limiting what the businesses in town could do. Again, I thank you for bringing it up and trying to make it happen. Just wanted to speak my mind about it.
All right. Thanks, Stephen. Really appreciate it. Anybody else out there, Aaron?
Yes.
Hello.
Gary.
Hello. Go on ahead.
Hi.
Please
I'm
introduce
Gary
yourself.
Todd. I own Hidden Garden Cottages, corner
Hi,
of
Gary.
Butler Hoffman. I am in a unique position because I'm downtown business owner and also a downtown resident. I live above the shop. So I am cautious, very cautious about what you're about to do. I am open-minded enough to give it a try, but I think there are lots of concerns that need to be addressed. Some of which Julie brought up. I can't tell you the number of times we have had people urinating on our property and having sexual relations on our property when they're not staying here. These things go on. So the police presence is either going to have to be increased. Extending this into the summer is insane, as far as I'm concerned. We don't need it. The point of this is to help the business community, to help the restaurants that sell alcohol. And you don't need that in the summer. So I think you need to step back, think about what the purpose is. I think you do need to talk to the business community and see what they think about it. But I can see us, I can go along with a pilot program in the spring, but then I think it really needs to be looked at before you decide to continue it in the fall. So thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Gary. We got anybody else out there, Aaron? Stephen Phelps again. You want to wait and see if anybody else is out there? Anybody else besides Stephen?
I do not see anyone but Stephen.
All right, Stephen. Go for it.
I had one more thing. I'm sorry.
Okay.
With the new liquor laws that businesses can sell to-go cocktails in approved containers, we have been selling to-go cocktails for takeout and such for the last 3 months. I think that will continue through the summer. And what's the difference if we're selling those and people decide to crack them open and walk through town like they have been for the last few years with no law enforcement?
Got it. All right. Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment. See anybody, Aaron?
I do not.
All right, very good. With that, we'll transition to council comments. I'll take you in alphabetical order. Mr. Dean.
Nothing to add, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
All right, Miss Leo. Did we lose her?
I just wanted to echo what Scott said. I think if we approach this cautiously and see how it goes, and based on the comments, some of the public comments, we should see how it goes and then make a decision. And I remember almost a year ago when we were looking at pop-up patios, we had some of the same concerns. And it's worked in other cities. Perhaps it's a fit for us, perhaps it's not, but I think we'll find out. And we approached, our approach last year was, let's be creative, but let's also leave ourselves room to tweak things or change things as needed, or to not do it if it didn't work. And I think that that's a good approach for social. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Miss Stanton.
Yeah, I'll echo what Holly said. I really just want everybody to keep an open mind about this. If we're able to start this in the spring and all goes well, I think we can take a look at these things and see if it's something that we continue through the summer, we choose not to in the summer, we bring it back in the fall. I think like pop-up patios, we were able to tweak a few things if we needed to. We have to give things a chance. We have to say yes to a few things. We have to start looking at pilot programs and then adjusting. If we say no to everything, then we never grow. And I think we really have to start giving things a chance and do pilot programs and tweak along the way.
All right, Mr. Trester.
Yeah, well, this is a great meeting. I think we did some really good work today, and I commend our Madam Mayor Pro Tem on a good debut performance.
Well, thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, I'll just thank you so much. Y'all were very helpful. I love this type of a meeting where I feel like I see our future. It's pretty cool. I think doing what we can to certainly hear what folks have to say. And I appreciate everyone's comments and the public comment, but also recognizing that we have some opportunities to really do add some neat things. I think it's really exciting. It's very encouraging. And that's why we do what we do. So with that, all right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second from Ken. Madam Clerk, if you could take the roll, please.
Stanton,
Yes.
Trester,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
Leo,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes,
Peterson.
she's gone.
A new number joined. I just want to make sure.
Oh. All right, with that, we're adjourned. Thanks so much, everybody. See you Monday.